highlight of my visit to Berlin was to go to the Church of Reconciliation and hand over a copy of my predecessor Eric Burton's book, No Walls Within, in which he had expounded his vision of a church for all ages, a church for all peoples, with no walls within.
The Congregational Union of England and Wales really gave me a tremendous privilege of visiting church. The National Sunday School Union came and said, would I write a book on the growth of family church worship. There was Connie Parker and Bert Hamilton, along with Dick Hall. These three were the real pioneers of encouraging the churches to think very seriously about transferring the idea of Sunday school to family church. And when I was first appointed, would I continue to go around the churches to try and encourage this.
And when you arrived at Highbury then, it was an opportunity to put into practice the philosophy of the book almost.
There was the big question, right, I was going to give up the work of youth and children's work secretary for the denomination. Where was I to go? And I had a letter. Would I come down to Highbury for an informal meeting? We shall in the near future be looking for a new minister. But before we start doing anything very officially, we would like to have a quite off-the-record meeting with you. By we, I mean the present deacons of the church. When we went round the room, and one of the deacons who was at that meeting was Dick Adams. I think I'm right in saying he's the only one who was in that meeting, still in the church today. And there was one of the many deacons, one of the very lovable characters in Highbury, was a man called Fred Wright. Fred had been a master at the grammar school, science master at the grammar school, and he'd retired. And one of the questions which Fred asked me, and he asked it with great difficulty because he had cancer of the tongue. And he said, Mr. Burton, if you come to this church, would you be prepared to experiment? And I said, what do you mean by experiment? He said, well, it seems to me that you've got a number of ideas that you would like to put into action. Would you be prepared to experiment? And there was a long pause while I sort of thought, well, what's to be my answer for this? And then he enlarged on his question and he said, I think I ought to say, would you be prepared to experiment if we as deacons were prepared to recognize that sometimes your experiments might fail if we continue to support you in spite of failure? And I drove back to London that night on a glorious summer evening. I thought, good gracious, here's the church that's really sort of has sufficient vision to want to prepare. And that was what impressed me. It all followed afterwards that they gave me an invitation, and I thought, yes, well, a church that's prepared to have that kind of vision has got a future.
And what would your prayer and vision be for Highbury today?
Be thou my vision, Lord.
Wonderful, wonderful. That says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Before coming to Highbury, Eric had travelled the country as the Congregational Union's Youth and Children's Officer. You can find out more about Highbury's vision for now and the future at www.highburychurch.co.uk.